Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ethan Evans. This is a Level Up Career Talk, and specifically, it's an unusual one about how to say you stink nicely. And when I wrote this, as you'll see, I was talking about how to say you stink like someone actually has odor. But of course, people correctly took it as a double meaning of also how do you tell someone they have poor performance. So we're going to jump right in. I want to share with you, though, honestly, we have some pre-submitted questions, which is great, uh, but working on them scared the hell out of me. This is hard, and I don't want to. I don't want you to think I'm going to handle every question, both the pre-submitted ones and the live ones, well. This is very hard. I'm doing it in public, in person, for two reasons. One of them is to help you see how to attempt it and to get better at it. Three reasons. The second is to entertain, honestly, because I'm sure there'll be some funny slip ups. And the third is I myself want to practice. Even though I don't have to do this anymore, it's such a hard skill that having empathy for people who need to give a really hard message and are struggling to do so, I want to go through the experience again myself. So let's jump right in. No waiting. Uh, sorry. So most of you know me very well, but my quick bio is here. Trained as an engineer, 12 years in startups, 15 years at Amazon, where I built a bunch of stuff, like Prime Video and the App Store. And now I coach and teach. So I won't belabor any of that, but this is my history. Quick agenda. This says there's a presentation. I think I have 2 slides. Then I'm going to go through a couple pre-submitted questions because I think they're very common and they're still very hard. And then the actual most sporting part, I will make sure there's some time for a couple of you, at least, maybe more, to hit me with hard messages to deliver that I've never thought about. And so you gotta stay a little bit to the end to get to the actual, like, the hardest part, but you got to give me a chance to warm up because this is hard. So the 2 teaching slides. It's my belief, I take as an honest belief, that it's possible to be both polite and direct, and that this is a skill worth cultivating. That as a leader, your goal is to be personally, as a human, polite, calm, friendly. You can add words like empathetic. You want to be a good person and be easy to get along with. This is a career skill. Be likable. Being likable is a career skill, while also being professionally firm and direct. And that's the hard part, is how do you say you stink, but nicely? So that I once fired a guy, I won't go through the whole story, but I once had to let someone go, and he wrote me a thank you note at the end of it. He said, look, I know that was hard for you to do, but I can see it was best for me. Now, I won't say that every person I fired has thanked me. Some of them hate me to this day, but it is possible sometimes. And that's what you're aiming for. It's also obviously easier to do all this stuff with pre-planning. So if you need to give a hard message, if at all possible, prepare your words ahead. The other thing I realized in preparing for this class, for this discussion, is that pre-existing trust and relationship are crucial. Trying to give a hard message to someone who already dislikes you or who doesn't know you is much harder and is going to go less well than someone who trusts you. If you just think about this, if you're married or have a significant other, a family member, while there can be all kinds of dynamics in a family, you have the relationship to say, hey, I need to share something with you that may be difficult to hear, but I love you, and this is something I really got to tell you. So this is like where you're trying to tell your spouse, for example, that the weight they're putting on, you're worried about their long-term health, and the way they're eating, you're worried about, their health, or something like that. That's a message you can give because you have a relationship. It would be much harder And we're going to see that in the questions I've been asked. Okay, so I already covered that I don't expect to handle all these well. So if at the end you're like, yeah, you screwed that up, feel free to use the chat and give your alternate answer or message to any of these. I won't be looking at the chat, so you won't be coaching me, but feel free when you see the questions or you hear them to say how you would handle it or try to. This is your chance to practice too. So, second slide. Conditions also matter, the setting and the tone. Unless it's a crisis or someone is about to get hurt or injured, you have to give hard messages privately. Now, I have had to interrupt fights in public and say, look, we don't do that here. I need you to stop. Let's go to our, but remember, people's reputations matter to them enormously. And that's this next part. Hard messages really aren't about facts. They aren't. Yes, they are, but they aren't. They're about how I feel and how you feel and how we feel and what feelings get brought up in the delivery. Okay? And a big thing here is, and we'll see this in one of the questions someone sent in, don't use anger or frustration as a way to bolster your courage. Where a lot of people go wrong is they can't bring themselves to take on the emotional risk of giving a hard message until they're emotional themselves, until they're angry, they're frustrated, they're pissed, they're offended. They can't bring themselves to face the potential confrontation and the social awkwardness without being powered up by their own upsettedness. Well, if you go into one of these discussions full of emotion that's giving you the backbone, all the other person is going to react to is your emotion. Humans are incredible emotion detectors. And as soon as you bring your emotion into the room, they're going to sense that emotion, and everything they say and do is going to be about how they're responding to your emotion, not how they're responding to anything logical you think you're saying. So if I come in angry and I say, I need to tell you, I'll use my partner Jason here. Jason, you really screwed up what we're doing with this class. I can't believe you've disappointed me. He's not going to hear a damn thing I say about the facts. He's going to be like, whoa, Ethan's raging. What the, right? He's not going to hear anything I say. He's only going to see anger or frustration or disappointment. So pick a calm time also. Don't, if you can avoid it, don't catch an employee in a crisis or after asking them to work all weekend, right? Next, if you can, and you'll see me do this in some cases, ask questions rather than start with statements. Try and make sure you understand the situation rather than acting on your assumptions, because sometimes people have reasons for things that are very different than what you expect and may even be okay once you understand them. Finally, I once had to lay off a large group of people. I've done it a couple times. You have to be prepared to give time and privacy after a message. Some people will sort of sit stoically through the message, but if you then ask them, do you understand? Are you committed to making changes? What's your plan? Is this going to be different tomorrow? You're cornering them, and they're not going to take that well. They're going to do something to get away from the pressure, attack back, flee the room, shut down. Your goal is not to create emotional pressure on people. That's a disaster because then they become unpredictable and irrational. So you've also got to know when to pause and revisit. If someone can't handle a message, you've started it, they know what's coming. So if I say to someone, today, Fred, we really need to talk about your performance. On project A, B, and C, you've been late, and that's below our standards here. And Fred bursts into tears or gets red in the face. It's correct to say, I see that this discussion is very uncomfortable for you. We need to discuss this, but we don't have to complete it right now. Would you like a minute or would you like to continue this tomorrow? And you give them choice. Choice gives them a little sense of control, which can allow them to hold their emotions and feel safer. Because again, your goal is not to threaten people. All right. So let's go right for it. Hard message zero. I call this zero because it's the one I advertised the class with. And how I once needed to tell an employee, you have very strong body odor. You stink. And others sitting around you have complained about it. Now, I'm going to up the stakes here and be transparent because it was over 20 years ago, and I'm sure the person involved has no connection to this. Much of my audience, always and today, is Indian. And I share that because this gentleman was Indian. Now, we had other Indian employees in the same office, but this gentleman, his body odor was very strongly some type of curry. And that was every day. And for both the Indians and the other people in our open office environment, they came to me and told me, it's killing us. This guy reeks. Now, why do I bring up he's Indian? Why do I share that? Because it puts worse cultural overtones on the message I needed to share. Because I'm the white guy, and if I just say, dude, you smell like curry, it can sound very racist. It can sound like I'm attacking his culture and saying you can't eat curry anymore or something like that. So these messages get harder depending on circumstance. So what should I have said and what did I actually do? This is 20 years ago. I'll tell you how I handled it, which was not how I think it should be handled. And I didn't have the skill at the time. So I believe if I were handling this today, I would invite the employee to my office at a calm time. And even though he's Indian, I always use the name Fred for people. I would say, hi, Fred, I need to talk to you today about something. It may be a little awkward. Now, why would I open with it may be a little awkward? People do better if you give them warning that bad news is coming. If you give them a chance, oh, it might be awkward. Okay, now I'm prepared for something awkward. So I would say, well, Fred, I need to discuss something with you. I'm sorry, but it may be a little awkward, but I need to share it with you. I don't know if you're aware, but I think you might want to know. Why am I framing it with those clauses? First, I don't know if he's aware. Second, I do think he might want to know. This part I got to get exactly right. I don't know if you're aware, but there's a strong odor in your work area. And I'm not sure if it's coming from you or your clothes. But we've had a number of people mention it, and I need to ask you to address it. So now I've put it out there, but I've done it in a way. Why did I add the clothing thing? Well, number one, this gentleman had a leather jacket, and I actually do think that the jacket, leather holds smells, and I think it was holding part of the smell. But the other reason is I don't need to tell him that he personally smells. I need to tell him there's an odor problem he needs to fix. It's up to him to figure out, is it his clothes, is it his hair, is it whatever? Now, so I would say everything I said, and then I would say, I need to ask you to find a way to reduce the strong smell of curry in your workspace because it's disrupting the whole team in our shared open work area. And that may include a change in your personal hygiene, I don't know. And then I would just sit. and see if they wanted to ask me a question, if they wanted to say, okay. I might give it a few seconds and then say, do you have any questions or is there any way I can help you? If they do, great, answer them. If they don't, then I say, okay, I again apologize if this was awkward or difficult to hear, but I need you to take action on it. Thank you. And do I believe that's a perfect message? No, but that's how I would attempt to handle it. Now, let's talk about what I actually did. I took the coward's way out, and I want to be clear about that. The coward's way was this gentleman happened to be with us through a contracting firm. I called the contracting firm, said, this guy smells, and I need you to tell him. This is not what you should do. It's not what I should have done. But I'm here to give you all straight truth. I didn't handle this like I should have. 20 years ago, I didn't have the skill. And I recognized there was a way I could run away from the problem and try and make it somebody else's problem. And that's what I did. I have no idea how they handled the message. So I can't tell you. Things got some better after that. And because he was a contractor, it wasn't a long-lived situation. But I punted and cheated, and I don't recommend that. Obviously, sometimes you can leave hard messages if there is somebody else who really should deliver it. But what I did was I failed to handle my own, get good at handling your own stuff. And I didn't. Okay, so let's keep rolling. Someone sent this question in. The question was, your breath smells so bad that it makes people feel uncomfortable interfacing with you in a conference room, and the team culture is in decline as a result. I call this hard message 0 version 2 because it's still about someone smelling. So I would do all the same things, pull them into a room, say I may have to tell you something awkward, say, hey, I don't know if you're aware, but I think you'd want to know, sometimes you have really bad breath, and it's making other people uncomfortable. That part I would handle all the same way. The part I don't know, because these questions come to me without people's names and more context, is this team culture is in a decline as a result. I don't necessarily understand what's going on here. It's obviously saying the person, I'm not sure where the team culture part comes from. So I don't know how to address that. But there's some additional piece of explaining how this is impacting the team. The normal framework you would use for this is something called Situation Behavior Impact, or SBI. You would, if you had to go into this part, if there's something substantial here from the person who asked it, you would say, I also need you to know that in this situation where we're all in a room together, unfortunately, your bad breath is causing this problem, right? That people's reticence to get close to you and really engage you is having this effect on the culture. And we need not only to address, I want to give you the chance to address this for all of your circumstances, but we need to address it in this conference room setting. And that's how I would, as best as I could, handle this. Now we'll get to live questions in a few minutes. We have a few more. So hard message 0 version 3. This one's a little different. Somebody sent in. You can read it all, but basically there was a guy who came in from remote work, and he smelled like booze the next day, and he was going for a major presentation to leadership. Now, this is one where I think it's easier. It's easier because you can truly pull someone aside and say, hey, Fred, I got to let you know something. You're meeting with leadership later today, and I can smell alcohol on you. Now, I know you're not drunk or you don't seem to be, but I don't think you want to go into the room with leadership, smelling like you do, because it could totally derail your presentation. And so if you have a chance, go back to your hotel and do something. That's honestly you trying to help someone. Again, though, when I think about that message and how to frame it, the key here is you don't have to say, wow, did you have a huge bender last night? Instead, you say, I don't know where it came from, but for whatever reason, you smell strongly of alcohol. Why do you say it that way? It lets them say, oh, yeah, this dude spilled a beer on me last night. Maybe the truth is they had 12 shots and were blind drunk, and they smell like alcohol because they threw up on themselves. That's not your problem. You're trying to get them the message and let them save face. And so, again, remember, emotion is what you're managing here. You have to convey the facts, but you don't want to corner people. You can obviously give someone this same message by saying, hey, I don't know if you drank a lot last night or what, but you smell drunk. I don't think you are, but you don't want to go in and talk to leadership smelling like a drunk. That's much more accusatory. And so you want to give the message, what's the point? You smell like alcohol, not maybe you're a drunk. That's a different message if you need to give that later. So that's version 3 of the same thing. I lost message 1 somewhere when I was renumbering all of these. It'll probably show up in a second. Hard message 2, which should be labeled hard message 1, my error, is how do I tell my boss's boss that my boss is not the best leader in the world like he thinks he is? Why is this supposed to be hard message 1, the first one after how I advertise the course? Because so many people ask me this question, and there's a couple versions of this they ask me that I'm going to show you next. And the first thing I want to tell you is this is obviously, I can tell you, and I will, how to deliver this message as best as is possible. But you need to understand this is probably not going to go well unless you have some special circumstances. I'll explain why. I want to explain, I've been the boss's boss, right? I've also been the person trying to do this. If I'm the vice president and you're trying to tell me about one of my directors, I have 2 choices. You're coming to me and saying this person who works for me is not as good as I think and is actually a problem. At that moment, I have 2 choices. Choice 1 is believe you, in which case I suddenly have several problems. I have the problem that my director isn't very good, and so I may need to start performance managing them. I may need to go give them a hard message. I may need to replace them, in which case I'm going to have to go through a PIP and do without them and cover for their job and find someone new and onboard them. Basically, believing you causes a lot of problems for me. Now, in a perfect ideal world, if you had a lot of facts and I was brilliantly open-minded, maybe I'd do that. But in reality, let's look at option 2, which is believe that you don't get it and you're a complaining whiner. Now I have almost no problems. I have you're not as good as you think, but you're junior and it's okay. Maybe you can be fixed. Maybe you'll be fired. Doesn't matter. All I have to do is tell my director, hey, Ethan came to me and complained about you, said blah, blah, and blah. I don't believe any of that. I think you're great. Take care of it. Which is easier for me? Now, you might think, well, that's cold-blooded. Maybe not. Remember, a lot of this can be subconscious. It's a ton of pain for me to believe they're no good. It's not much pain for me to believe that you're no good. And so, what's the easier path? People tend to do the easy thing unless they have a good reason not to. So what are the exceptions? How can you attempt this message if you have to? First, do you have a relationship already with the boss's boss? Do you have a relationship with, let's say, the VP or the skip level? If you don't, you're probably screwed. You're better off just leaving or tolerating it. Second, are you a top performer? So a strong performer with some kind of relationship can say, look, skip level, I always call skip level Skip. Look, Skip, uh, I'd like to talk to you about something really sensitive and confidential. And I know it could be awkward and put you in a hard position. What am I doing? I'm again framing the problem, giving them notice, and kind of setting them up for, look, I understand that this is awkward and could put you in a hard position, but I think it's important. I know it seems at least like you have a really high impression, a really strong positive impression of your director, Fred, but I want to share with you some data points where I'm struggling. I and others on the team are really struggling with Fred's leadership. Now, why is it important to say I and others on the team? You want it to sound like it's not just you, and it's actually important that you have someone's name in mind and their permission to use them later. You want to go to the manager. It's also important you have examples. Just going to the manager and saying, Fred's terrible. I need you, I can't stand working for Fred. He's a terrible boss. This is not useful. You have to give them some specifics of how Fred's performance is impacting your performance. And they've got to be specific and tangible. Ideally, you have at least 3 clear-cut examples. And you want to say, if you can take a minute, Skip, I have 3 different examples that I want to walk you through, because I know in any one example there might be extenuating circumstances, but I want to share with you that this is really a pattern. Then you go through the 3 examples. The other thing you want to have ideally is you want to have talked to someone else on your own team and said, look, I'm going to go to Skip and talk about this. If Skip asks to talk to someone else to get a second opinion in private, in confidence, only if they seem open to it, are you willing to be named as someone else they could talk to. You want to find someone like that if at all possible. And then you want to say, look, Skip, I know it's hard to hear there could be a problem with one of your leaders. And I know that that's sensitive and might cause problems for you. But there are other people on the team who are willing to speak to you about it if you want more facts. If you don't, let's just leave them out of it. But if you want to get more facts yourself, I can point you to other people. And then you see. Now, this is the best possible way that I know of to deliver this message. If you don't have a bunch of examples, or you don't have a relationship, or you're not a strong performer or viewed as a strong performer to the Skip, you're better off just, this isn't going to probably work. And there's no magic words I can give you to make it work because you don't have standing. The last thing I will say, it is totally worth trying to figure out, why does the Skip have this high opinion? And what I mean by that is, I've shared publicly many times that I got myself laid off / fired. They were technically layoffs, but they were kind of firings twice in my career because I had a big mouth. Now, in that case, I was complaining to the CEO in both cases about one of my peer vice presidents in a startup. Here's the thing. In both cases, I didn't realize I was complaining about something that was a real problem. But what I didn't realize was that the person had a real value to the CEO I wasn't seeing. So in the first case, the person was the head of product management. I was the head of operations. They were very negative about the future of our product, very critical of our schedules. And I complained that we're a startup and they're undermining morale, and I was very down on them. The problem is, they were actually right about some of the product points. So I was railing about thing 1, but my boss valued thing 2. Same scenario later, different situation, different company. We had a sales guy. The sales guy was essentially lying about delivery dates to the customer in order to get the deal. I complained, this guy's always lying. It's not true. He's selling stuff we can't actually deliver. Thought that was a problem. It is a problem. We were a starving startup that was about to go out of business. What I didn't realize is the CEO wanted the deal signed, and he'd worry about messaging the customer that it was going to be later, but he needed the signed deal to raise money and to get money in the door, and he didn't care that they were lying. Both cases, I didn't figure this out until later. If you want to have this kind of discussion successfully, you want to try to understand, why does your boss have this high opinion? Because one thing you can say is, hey, Skip, I know that you really value Fred. It seems like you really value Fred because he's closing deals. And I agree, that's really important. Unfortunately, he's closing deals by lying about the possible delivery dates. And I have to use the word lying because I've told him we can't hit those dates, and he's giving them out anyway. So it's not a case of a mistake. I've been incredibly clear. And that's putting demoralizing pressure on my team. So I need to talk to you about how to keep his value, but address this problem. And see, that changes things. I'm not asking you to fire the guy. So enough on this example. Let's look at the variation people ask me about. I'm not going to re-message this. I'm going to make a point. Someone sent in this question: you've demoralized the team, blah, blah, blah. You also don't understand shit about our core product offering or technology behind it. Now, in this case, the person wants to talk to the manager themselves, not to the Skip level. The thing I want you to see is this person's angry. They're angry. And their writing is insulting. You can message this message the same way, with examples, with people supporting you. I also haven't demonstrated asking questions yet, so I'll show that. But you've got to shut down your emotion, because if you go in and tell someone you don't know shit about our core product, even if you don't say those words, if what's in your mind when you go into the room is, hey, manager, I'm here to tell you I think you're dumb, that's all they're going to get from you, no matter what words you say. You have to go in with a constructive mindset, or don't bother. And if you want a book on this, read the book Leadership and Self-Deception. It's entirely about how to change your mindset to give you the best chance at a discussion like this. It's Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. It's on my book list on my website. But this person has a rant. They're mad. And if you're here watching, I get that maybe you just wrote it to be extreme in this case, but you can't take the emotion in the room. You've got to find a way to approach the conversation calmly, or all they hear is your emotion. Now, if I wanted to approach this with a manager, I'm not going to go through the whole answer, but I would start with questions. I'd say, hey, boss, can I talk to you some about how to work well for you? Who wouldn't want that, right? How do I work well for you? I'm struggling because I find that, whatever. But I wanted to ask you, I've noticed, you don't even have to have the I'm struggling part. I've noticed that you're very, very in the details. Example 1, example 2, example 3. You're on top of every comment in Jira, every status transition, etc. And I wanted to ask, why do you feel you're in the details, so much in the detail? Like what is driving your need to be at that level of detail? Because I'm finding it hard to be efficient, right? But the bottom line is, you want to ask them, why are you in the details so much? And let them talk about it. And that, if you can get a discussion going, you can say, it's hard for me when you're in this level of detail. But this has to be a discussion about why are they in these situations, and how can you help them not need to be. That is your only way to deliver this successfully. Criticizing them will do nothing except get you fired, or a low rating, or otherwise bad. Okay, third example of the same thing. I'm going into such depth on this because clearly people want to know how to tell their managers hard things. My manager is the head of product. because he's new, he hasn't earned trust, so he's prescriptive. Again, the micromanagement thing. I needs to look at everything. How do you tell him he's a blocker? He needs to trust his team, makes mistakes. Same thing. Empathy. Hey, Fred, can I talk to you for a minute? I know that you're new here and just coming up to speed. And I wanted to ask you some about how I and the team can help you with that, because I've noticed that you're very in the details. And I wanted that in some cases, you being so in the details is slowing us down because you're a bottleneck for everything we do. And again, that's getting to the problem first, not the best answer. But the idea is you would say, can you help me understand what it would take for you to give a little more space and a little more trust in the team? How can we work together towards you giving us more rope? That's the key question. And then that question, you have to sit quietly and let them answer it. And if they say, wow, I need to be in all the details, blah, blah, you say, well, okay, but that's having this impact. Example, this person's willing to talk to you too. So I ask again, is there any way we all want to succeed together? And the more we're able to do our work quickly, the better you'll look in the end. How can we help you with that? How can we help you? How can we help you? That's the approach. Notice a theme. My manager has shifted to using AI-generated responses for important questions on Slack. I understand the efficiency goal, but these responses, blah, blah, blah. I want to address this constructively without straining our relationship. Same thing. Calm time. Hey, manager. Hey, Fred, I've noticed I want to talk to you about how you're handling some things in Slack, because I think there's some possibility for improvement. Sounds good. Example. This message was very confusing to me and the team because it doesn't really address this or this, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to bring it up with examples and support. And again, you better be a good performer that they're willing to listen to. And ideally, if you want to influence people, you've got to have built the relationship first. Trying to influence someone who's never met you, just think in your relationship. If you didn't know me at all, you didn't even know me from LinkedIn, and I just showed up at your door trying to sell you something, you would react very differently than you even react to me now. Because at least now you have some awareness of who I am and what I do, and maybe you think some of the things I've written have insight. So you have some willingness to trust me. And I have some reputation because I had this executive career and whatever. Those are signals of trust. Complete strangers or people that haven't built that relationship, it's much, much harder. All right. Last example, and then we'll go to live questions. I believe you don't have what it takes to make it. And then there's some variations of this, like, oh, you're strong technically, but you have this problem. I believe you don't. This is the performance message. Different types of, is this job the right fit for you? Now, in terms of questions, one of my managers long ago taught me a question. I don't think it's perfect, but it will illustrate getting at this. She would ask people, do you think our company is, or our team, Fred, do you think our team is the best place for you to do, is the right place for you to do your best work right now? It's a leading question that basically says you're not doing that well, but is it a team fit problem? There are many ways to say this, but the best way is with a question. Hi, Fred, I want to talk to you, example maybe of recent performance. As you know, in a case like this, I would assume I've talked to them before. As you know, we talked about Project X where thing Y went wrong. And we talked about report A where there were errors B and C. This pattern is ongoing. And I wanted to ask you, do you feel like this is a great fit right now? Or should you be looking at alternatives? Then you let them speak. And if they say, no, I think it's great, I don't agree, blah, 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 then you can say, because you're having a discussion, well, I've got to be honest with you, because we've had these discussions in the past and nothing has changed, I don't fully share your optimism. And I think this may not be a fit. But that's after you've warmed up the discussion. A lot of these, the point is you can't hit people right in the face right away. They'll shut down or reject you. So we covered that. This one's kind of similar, so I'm not going to go into it. I thought this was really interesting. This is someone who actually wants to tell their employee, you're killing yourself for a job that isn't worth it. I thought that was, so whoever wrote this, God, I hope you're here or you see this video later. Thank you for being a great person. What you're trying to do here is awesome. You're trying to say, dude, don't. But how I would approach this is I would ask them, why are you pushing so hard? I've noticed that you're sacrificing so much for this job. Tell me a little bit about that. I'm glad that you care so much, but help me understand. And then this doesn't want to release things. I would talk to him about why, I noticed that you struggle. We've talked about you struggle to delegate. You've got a good team. Tell me a little bit more about that. Is it you think I'll judge you, et cetera? But I would lead a questions are less threatening and they start a discussion. The last part, this is a message where you're trying to help someone. But you've got to find out what's driving them. Remember, it's some fear or emotion that's driving them to do this. And so you've got to figure out what is the fear or emotion that's driving them. And that's what you have to address. This isn't a rational behavior. It's an irrational behavior at some level, or it seems irrational to you anyway. You've got to find out their rationale. This one's the last question. It's how to tell someone that they didn't do enough to get recognized. It's awkward because what you're doing is telling someone they're not going to be included with the rest of the group. It's kind of a performance message. I think this is, again, you've got to walk through the example. On Project X, this was your role and this was other people's. And I need to let you know that because your role was smaller, you're not going to be recognized. Okay. I'm going to skip this one so we can do live questions. Some of you may know I'm doing a course in a couple weeks. In a few weeks, it's my highest rated course, Level Up Breakthrough to Executive. If you want more on how to do this, I teach in the class more about how to handle hard messages and how to have executive presence. This shows that we're rated 4.7 stars overall. We've improved the course over time, and I'm proud to say the last time around, the people from our winter quarter rated us 4.87, which is, I think, pretty awesome, to be candid. I teach other classes, not going to take up your time. So I'm going to stop sharing. I have time to try and do a couple of these messages honest to God live with no prep. Who wants to try and hit me with something? And I'll do my best. It's hard, but I'll try. Raise your hand in Zoom if you would like to come off mute and ask me a really hard question related to business. Please don't ask me about how to create world peace or, I don't know. All right, Sarah, I see you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. I had this conversation, and it's kind of flipping the script away in a way with it was like my skip.
Okay.
And it was before I got let go, but I thought the way that they dealt the bad news was honestly terrible. So basically I wrote this sentence: how would you deliver this hard message? You're honestly terrible at dealing bad news with no emotional intelligence or thought about focusing on data-driven feedback. This is hardly a real performance review. How would you say that?
Come. So the key point is you want to say about your performance review that it lacks. I just want to make sure I understand the question. You want to say that it lacks data or examples and that they did a poor job delivering their opinion of low performance. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, it all just felt like it was just rolling downhill, and there was no like, it was basically everything you shouldn't do. There was no breaks. There was no like, it kind of just jumped into it.
Okay. So I think what I would want to do there is you have to acknowledge the fact that they have a low opinion of you,
Yeah.
because the point is you're not there to litigate. At that moment, you're not there to make a point of, I think your evaluation of me is wrong. That's a different argument. The argument
Right.
you want to have is you did a poor job communicating this. So I think you have to make that clear up front. So you would say, hey, Skip, I want to follow up on our recent performance discussion, but I'm not here to debate your perspective of my performance. So this isn't me fighting with you about your overall conclusion. Now, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to accept the conclusion, you can say, maybe we can discuss that separately later. But right now, I want to share how I experienced that process. And the reason you talk about I experienced is no one can argue with how you experienced it.
Okay.
The idea is that people can tell you, I didn't mean that. But if you start saying you did X, you did Y, they can say, no, I didn't, or I didn't mean that. But if you say, this is what I experienced, it's much harder for people to say, well, that isn't what you felt, right? That's an illogical statement, right? To tell you, oh, Sarah, you didn't feel that. Can't do that. You shouldn't feel that. Well, I can try and do that, but that's also, well, like, that is what I felt, though. Okay. So then what you say is, what I experienced was an unrelenting stream of criticism, or several sequential criticisms that weren't backed up with specific examples I could learn from. And I wanted to give you this feedback because if you want me to improve, or anyone else, we need to get feedback from you that's backed up by examples we can discuss and I can learn from in order to take action, and that aren't delivered as a barrage of criticism that I can't do anything about, which is just crushing and demoralizing. And so that's how I would try to handle something like that. Again, on the fly. With the beauty of your situation here is you at least have time to plot your message. But what I would be plotting is, how do I make sure that they don't mistake it for a debate about performance? Because
Yeah,
that's not what you're
for sure.
debating. And then how do you speak in terms of what you experience and what you need to be different in order to do what they want, which is change and improve. Now, will that work? With all of these messages, all of these things,
Yeah,
we don't control the other person. We can only
yeah,
give the message as best we can. All right.
for sure.
I hope
For
that
sure.
helps. And I'm sorry
No,
you
I
got
think
laid
so.
off.
No, this was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So I just it was hard because the door was shut behind me essentially after that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you can't control that, and it's like if you leave that conversation thinking, well, I think that for their sake also that could have just gone better. I don't
Yeah.
think they liked having that conversation either. So,
Yep. I'm going to have to move on, Sarah, to try and help one or two other people. Manu.
sorry. Thanks.
Manu, you're up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 here, bud. I'm going to move on. All right, Harry, you're up.
Hey, Ethan, thank you for taking this time. I have a real world problem that's going on with me right now. So I have a team. I'm a senior manager at Amazon, by the way. I have a bunch of engineering teams under me. We got, and I have a new boss that came up. I report to a director. Traditionally, I used to report to a tech director where our teams were pretty happy about the way how we improve technologies. The change that got happened because of all obvious reasons is that we have been moved to a business director right now. The problem that I'm facing right now is the entirety of my engineering teams are not pretty happy because of the style of my boss, which is basically their own skips. And I have to communicate this to my own boss right now, saying that, hey, your job satisfaction and your morale of your entirety of your org is not great. We may have to change something. The problem I face is my boss is a pretty strong person. I'm looking for ways to communicate this to him and to make him understand. The caveat here or an additional data point is he also have a broader org, which is pretty non-technical, more of an operational function. So here is where I am, maybe kind of looking for some suggestions of how do I communicate.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I haven't understood your question. So in one sentence, what's the message you need to give your boss and why? Something about a reorg. Well, I don't know. So as crisply as possible, what's the issue?
So the team under him, the org and the technology team under him is not happy about the culture that he brings into the org.
And what is that culture?
Not driving technical innovations is the culture, and being more business oriented, which expects immediate results than investing in long term.
Interesting. As someone who's been on both sides of that, my first comment to you is maybe he's right. In other words, technology innovation is a bunch of useless bullshit if it doesn't make money. And so the first thing for you to consider is, particularly in Amazon's culture today, as led by Andy Jassy, it's about turning a profit. It's not about long-term innovation. So engineers get hung up on long-term innovation and they think that there's some gold because they innovated something. If it's not cranking out money, you need to think real hard about, is the problem that you and your team believe that building new technology is a holy grail as opposed to money? Now, I've come at you really hard. I may be wrong. It may be that you are a part of a team where innovation really is the only way to make money. But one reason I've come at you hard is to try and show you the pressure that your boss is probably getting rippling down from Jassy. I had a director recently who was then fired. His VP, this is an Amazon director, his VP told him point blank, no one cares if your team is unhappy. No one cares. If some of them quit, that's okay. We need results now. So either you lead to get us results now or you go. And he's gone. So why I'm telling you this is you've got to think really hard about when the engineers want to innovate, are they innovating because they want to play with cool technology, or is there a goal? Now, if there's a real goal and I've given you a hard time and you're like, wow, this sucks, I wanted help telling him something and what you're doing is telling me I'm wrong. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to balance it. If you're right, you've got to really make the case in their language. So the language has got to be, look, I understand that as a culture, we have a lot of pressure on short-term profitability, but I want to share with you some chances to have even bigger profits later if we support a culture of investment and innovation. But you've got to sell the story that changing what they're doing is going to meet their goals in the end.
Okay.
That's the key. Is, of course, there are many possibilities here that this person's just incompetent or doesn't recognize the value of technology. And I don't know your manager enough to help.
No, he's certainly competent. He's a long timer. I totally don't question his. I'm totally coming from an angle where he also wants to make sure his team is happy, that there is a job satisfaction component to it.
Got
So
it.
we are trying too much hard on that aspect too, while like it's trying to kind of keep the
So
balance.
that's great. Then you talk to him about start always when you can with common ground. I know team satisfaction is really important to you.
Mhm.
Start with the common ground because he's like, yeah, it is important to me. And I wanted to share with you, your technical team is struggling and they're becoming less satisfied because they are only experiencing pressure for short-term results, and they care a lot about long-term defensible innovation. And so I wanted to talk to you about how can we prioritize some investment in valuable long-term innovation. And that's the tying it back to his business piece. So that's my best quick help for you. It's a great question. And the only reason I sort of use you as an example is, and maybe unfairly, and I knew that, was some engineers, some people in all functions, but with engineers, some engineers want to work on the coolest whizzy technology and they're less concerned or even unaware of how that might tie to business value.
Yeah, I totally agree the point you made, but I think the point that I kind of forgot to mention in the upfront on my earlier question was my boss was also kind of trying to make the team to be happy. Like we were trying to improve our job satisfaction, which literally it's becoming hard. So I'll have to convey this message that okay, your team is not just because not happy because that we are not giving free lunch, but at the same time they're not kind of valuing your long-term investment. So that's a super helpful. Thank you, Ethan.
All right. So Manu, I'm sorry you didn't get a chance. I unfortunately need to go. I have another appointment at 1 o'clock. I hope everyone enjoyed this very much. It is very hard. Hopefully you learned a few things. I was able to help you. And I'm sorry I didn't get to everyone's questions. I never do because there's always lots of good questions. But I appreciate it very much. And thank you for letting me practice. This is tricky. And as you saw, I'm not great at it. It's hard messages are called hard for a reason. They're not just hard for the listener, they're hard for the person giving. So practice, and thank you all. I'll see you all later.